Hello, eighth graders. We're going to keep continuing on our Civil War part of our curriculum. Today is day one of 2 days of notes that we are going to do. I put the blank notes templates, it's the blank template for preparing for war notes on Google Classroom, so you can type in the missing parts from the slides as we go. Remember that if it's helpful to pause the slides, that's totally fine. Make sure you take your time. You can always pause it, type in what you'd like, but I suggest that you do a split screen when you do this. So we are going to talk about preparing for the war after Fort Sumter fell, which was one of the battles that we looked at on the online assignment last week. President Abraham Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to serve as soldiers for 90 days in a campaign against the South. So 75,000 volunteers were coming from the North or from the Union, and they were to serve as volunteers to fight for the unification of both the North and South, but also abolishing slavery. So Abraham Lincoln's goal was to make sure that the United States stayed as one union, not divided by sectionalism between the North and South, and to make sure that slavery was against the law in both in all areas of the United States. So in your mind right now, I need you to keep in mind that Abraham Lincoln's mindset was that this was going to be a short 90-day campaign. And a campaign, I mean, two sides going against each other, not specifically battle, not specifically war, but something that was being executed to end this disagreement. And that was supposed to be 90 days. With flags held high, soldiers on both sides marched off to war. So, both the Union and the Confederates, the North and the South, they were both fighting for their own beliefs. Most felt that a certain gallant battle would resolve the issue. So, obviously, these soldiers had high morale. They were excited to finish this quickly. I don't believe that they thought this was going to be anything that would take more than the allotted time of hypothetically 90 days. But that was very much not the case. The war lasted 4 long, destructive years. And I want you to remember that the Civil War was Americans fighting Americans. It was people from the North fighting people from the South. And as I'm sure many of you have, all of your family members and your relatives do not typically live in Ohio. I know for me personally, I have family in Texas, I have family in California, I have family in Indiana. So, that being said, there were people that were fighting their own relatives on opposing sides. So, let's keep that in mind when they must clearly have valued their beliefs in their mission to end slavery or continue to keep slavery, because at some points they were fighting their own cousins, their own uncles, in this war that they didn't plan to become so destructive, and especially something that they did not think would last more than a few months, let alone 4 years. A nation divided, Southerners believed that they had a right to leave the Union. They called the conflict the War of Southern Independence. So, at this point, they believed that it was their prerogative, their decision, their duty to leave the Union in order to start their own independence, because they believed that their economy and their manufacturing and their farms survived through slavery, and slavery was their right, and slaveries were part of their quote unquote property, and that nobody had the right to take away their property. So they believed that it was against their personal humanitarian rights to be forced to give that up. So that was what they were fighting for. They believed that they had this right to leave the Union and that the Union did not have the authority to stop them. Northerners felt that Southerners had betrayed their country and they were fighting to save the Union. So the Union, obviously, with the support of President Abraham Lincoln, wanted the country to stay together, to stay unified, and that those that were going against the Union, the Confederates that were fighting against what the President of the United States was saying, were considered traitors. So they were betraying the Union, the United States of America. Choosing a side was difficult for the remaining eight slave states in the U.S. in April of 1861. So, four of those eight states included North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Virginia, who decided to join the Confederacy and continue to fight for the Confederacy against the Union to become Southern independent and also to maintain slavery in those states. In the western part of Virginia, many people supported the Union. When Virginia seceded, the Westerners formed their own government and they joined the Union as West Virginia in 1863. So, this is one of those states that actually was successful in drawing lines. So, Virginia, which was one state, is now known today after 1863 as Virginia and West Virginia. So they maintained to be those two separate states years and years until current day, after 1863. The four remaining states, so we talked about the four before, and here's the other four. The four remaining states, Delaware, Kentucky, Missouri, and Maryland, had many people who supported the Union. So these states are known as border states. So as you can see right here, where my mouse is, we have Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and Maryland. These were the states that were divided between the Union and the Confederacy. So obviously, these were the states that were the Confederate states. These were the states that were the Union states. And this was kind of the border between the two. Maryland was very important to the Union because if Maryland sided with the Confederacy, Washington, D.C. would be surrounded by Confederate states. So obviously, this is D.C. located in this red dot right here. Sorry, this map is so blurry. But this was incredibly important because obviously Washington, D.C. was considered Union territory, being that it was the home of the White House and the President, Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln obviously was a Union man, or someone that supported the Union. So it would be would be a negative characteristic if Washington, D.C., this small spot right here, which had supporters of the Union typically, was surrounded entirely by the Confederacy. So, with that being said, we're going to stop right here. And then tomorrow we are going to discuss pro Confederate attack, and we're also going to discuss martial law. Thanks, guys. Make sure you email me if you have any questions and that you are doing the do nows.